little projections, okay? We're going to find inferior. It'll be connected to my medulla oblongata. The middle portion gets connected to my pons, and the upper portion gets connected to my midbrain. This is one of the reasons that this area affects the movement of our body, making sure that our movements are smooth. Okay? Here's the functions of this area of the brain. Monitors muscle contraction, aids in motor coordination, making sure those movements are smooth. It is very active with fine touch. Fingers, for example, we have in our fingers, the fingertips, we have the ability to determine textures. All right? Like I can pick up the texture difference between these two pieces of paper because we have such fine touch and so many nerve endings to help us detect that type of touch. The timekeeper, okay? Well, for example, finger tapping. All right? You ever know people who just have to constantly have something moving? I guess that's why they came up with like fidget spinners and that sort of thing, okay? It's keeping track of all these muscular movements that are occurring in the body. Now, because we do see connections to cranial nerves, one of the things that becomes important for this area of the brain, eye movement. Do you happen to remember how many muscles are connected to the eyes? 7. Very tiny, very fine-tuned. It's the reason that we can look up, we can look down, we can look side to side, we can put our eyes into a circular motion, we can roll them back, we can roll them down. Those muscles are the reason why. But now hold up. Eye movement to compensate for head movement. If you move your head really quickly, say for example, you're walking, you hear something behind you, you do this number. Is that correct? But you do that without falling over, getting dizzy, or being sick. Because that's how quickly that information is getting monitored. It is a form of protection for the organism. Okay? It allows us the ability with sound to judge pitch. That's not the only thing that comes with sound. Don't forget you got frequency and all that sort of stuff. But with this area's brain, pitch. This is really good. Okay?
Does the cerebellum continue to develop as the child is developing, or is like born with it kind of like? Because I know that there are some languages that like you can only learn when you're a child.
Language is a totally different area. You're going to find that that's in the cerebrum. The cerebellum, as development is occurring and growth, okay, this is going to be the area that, for example, helps the child learn how to walk. Because this will be concerned with an activity that the body does repetitively, as, for example, walking. In the grand scheme of things, walking for us is relatively smooth. But in the beginning, when you were, as a child is trying to learn that, it's not. So as they develop, as the muscles develop, as that part of the brain is developing, it becomes the smoother motion. So usually by the time the child is roughly about 4 to 5 years old, the brain is as big as it's going to get. Now, activating neurons, totally different story. Okay, but the actual structure itself. Yeah. Language. Now, distinguish between similar sounding words. Language, understand that sort of thing. We're going to find 2 areas of the brain that are going to deal with that. Okay? But our language for similar sounding, pot, top. Okay? It'll play a role in helping with that. But the actual learning of that, pot, top, saying it, reading it, different area of the brain. Okay?
Sorry. So is that like why, I have a kindergartner, is that why they always have to do the words over and over, even after they already learned them and they start repeating it?
Yes, because anything that could be repetition, not only that, but you want to make sure that you get that information into what's called long-term memory. The only way to do that is repetition and then sleep. How many of you knew how important sleep is to learning?
I've been told that in my
Okay? But how many of you sit up and maybe cram for the exam? Stay up all night? Do that sort of thing? Go take the exam? Okay? What really is important is making sure you get sleep. 8 hours a night. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm hearing nobody gets that? No? Oh my goodness, sleep is so important. Sleep is so important. It helps with planning and scheduling tasks, and then it is going to help with our emotions and pulse control. They think, children who have the ADHD, that their cerebellums are smaller than children that don't. That's one of the areas that they're studying. So this is a pretty huge area. Now, as we continue to move, all right, one of the things your textbook is going to talk about, and I keep saying that, and it's only because if you were going into this area, yeah, you would want to really learn. But in your general bio, probably just a small amount of 141. When you learned that egg and sperm meet, fertilization occurs, 1 cell becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 8, so on and so forth, it gives rise to germ layers. Does anybody remember that? Ectoderm, endoderm, mesoderm, that sort of thing? Your textbook is going to go through explaining the embryonic tissue, okay? But by the time we reach the adult brain, what we're seeing represented here, by the time we reach that, we have now, well, they refer to it as the adult brain. There is only one area of the brain that remains embryonic. Now, what exactly would that mean?
The same as like when you're being developed in the embryo?
It's the same as when the embryo was developing, which means very primitive. All right? Very primitive. There's this area of the brain that retains that primitive tissue. the diencephalon. It contains my thalamus, hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. My thalamus, my hypothalamus, my epithalamus. What? You're telling me that my thalamus, for example, that's responsible for taking all my sensory information, sending it to the areas of the brain where it's supposed to go, is primitive? Yes. Why? The goal is survival of the species, procreation of the species. These areas, thalamus, hypothalamus, epithalamus, hold up. They're part of my endocrine system. They're connected to my nervous system. This is controlling everything in my body. They are all primitive, have not changed since man showed up on the geological time scale. The goal of early man was to be alive and procreate. It wasn't until the evolution of occurring of the brain and developing this future portion that they began to develop tools, that they began to create fire, that they began to build structures, that they began to do agriculture. In very early man, it was only primitive. And even though we have a lot of this development now, okay, these areas right through here, all right, their goal, make sure you survive and make sure you procreate. It's not concerned with you reading or writing a note or picking up a piece of paper or anything like that. It's not concerned with that. Keep the species alive and let it procreate. So
if it's about survival, would that be the section of the brain that deals with the fight or flight response?
yes. Yep. Thirst, hunger. It's amazing what it does to keep the species alive. So, we've already know about our thalamus. We've talked about it quite a bit. We know that it contains at least 23 nuclei, meaning areas of dense nerve cell bodies, okay? They're put into one of 5 groups. It's termed the gateway because the signals have to go and be directed to the area of the brain that they need to go. We know that it is part of motor control to the cerebellum and cerebrum for skeletal for muscles. We know that it has a feedback loop between that cerebral cortex and basal nuclei for motor control. And we're learning about its association in what's called the limbic system. The limbic system we're still learning about, okay? But what it is an area in my cerebral